Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Gibbon podcast, part 2 of the thermal discussion. If you haven't listened to part 1, I strongly recommend you go and have a listen. If not, this is part 2 where we're going to dive in depth into looking at a couple of new devices that Pulsar have brought out. One of those being a rifle scope, the other being a change to a favourite, the Axion, and then we're going to have a quick discussion about the merger binoculars. But anyway, I'm not going to hold you back too long because obviously I just want to get straight on into this podcast so you can have a listen. So here I am chatting with Stefan again. Let's get straight to it. The Outdoor Gibbon podcast is proudly sponsored by the Shooting and Hunting Academy, an online training platform and UK registered learning provider that provides a host of accredited and nationally available courses and masterclasses delivered by leading industry experts. Hello and welcome to part 2. Stefan is back and we are here to talk about one of the latest releases from Pulsar, which is the Pulsar XL60 rifle scope. Hello, how you doing, Stefan?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Well, absolutely. Well, I thought it was a bit of a two-parter. The first part we covered, we looked at sort of the technology behind things, who you were, and kind of touch the bases on thermal. But I think this is kind of the next step, isn't it? This scope is really sort of moving forward and pushing a few new boundaries and stuff like that. And it's a real change for Pulsar in some ways.
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of features on this one that I think has been, so necessary for such a long time, but as it is with many manufacturers and so on, Pulsar's always been, the one with the ear to the ground and listen to us as ambassadors and hunters and shooters and whatnot to, kind of meet the demands that we have and so on. And we've got some good examples where they really listened, and I think Talion, as I said before, is one of them scopes where it was a result that just kind of like the perfect ergonomics, and in relation to a certain application, it's just a fantastic scope. And now with the new series coming out, listening to a broader market with the foxers, the coyote hunters, boar hunters, and specialists in general that need to be, who needs that, or rather who are capable of pushing that further shot.
Absolutely. So before we just dive into it too far, we'll just explain to everybody. So this looks like this scope. If you didn't know what a thermal scope looks like, it looks like almost a traditional looking rifle scope. The only things that are a bit different about it is one of the turrets stands quite tall, and the front end of the scope has a lens on it that basically looks black as far as you're concerned. But in all other terms and purposes, if you looked at that scope from a distance, you would think you were looking at a standard 60mm objective lens rifle scope.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think the thing is, 60mm lenses now seem to be, I think lots of other manufacturers are bringing them to market, but they will cover different parts of that shortly and talk about it. But there are some major advantages with this particular model that other manufacturers just don't have.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
So let's just start. Yeah. Well, I think we should start at the bit that we look in, because I think that's probably one of the biggest developments on this, and I think you had some basically feedback and input into the design of the eyepiece, really.
Yeah. It was. We can go back a bit. I mean, I've been going on about eye relief for a long time, because I'm always joking about saying that European hunters don't use sissy cartridges. No offense. But no, we're using large caliber caliber rifles, and I don't like me. Personally, I don't consider 308 a large caliber whatsoever. To me, that's kind of a intermediate round.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason being is so basically we have four different classes of game: class one, class two, class three, and class four.
Yep.
And to be able to hunt everything like moose and boar and whatnot, you need class one, and that means that we need to have a projectile with a certain speed and a certain amount of kinetic energy to
Okay.
be considered ethical for it. And that is, kind of like 6.5 Creedmoor, 6.5, 55, 6.5 by 55 Swedish Mauser, 308, 30-06, and up.
Right.
Yeah, so most people over here, the popular cartridges is like 8 by 57 JS, 308 obviously, 30-06, 6.5 Swedish Mauser of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
9.362. It's there's a bit of oomph to them, and when you have an eye relief that is just a bit of an over an inch,
Yes.
it isn't optimal. Just if you're a bit like most people can handle it and you won't get black eye, but if it's a bit stressful for some reason, so on, you don't get that perfect hold. Yeah, you're gonna
You're gonna end up
you're
either
gonna
with a bit of
feel it.
a black
Yeah,
eye or a bit of claret or something like that
yeah,
to a cracked eyebrow. Yeah.
yeah. So this was basically the feedback that I was pushing for a long time, and I think it's a bit more than a year and a half ago. I was over to film before the release of the XL50.
Yep.
And I remember, looking through that scope at the time and being amazed, but I was still like, yeah, I don't like the eye relief. And I had a whole day with parts of development discussing this matter, and um, there were concerns thinking like, oh, but isn't the eyepiece going to be too big or something? But looking at traditional rifle scopes today, the ocular part is pretty large, and you have a good eye relief on it. So
You do. Yeah.
it wouldn't damage the looks of the scope. So we discussed that for a bit, and they got the point. And I think there's been other hunters as well, obviously, addressing this matter. But yeah, that's so. I was pushing hard for it down there, and now it's here, and it's just a game changer.
Well, it's one of those things. You put it up on you bring the rifle up and you have a very quick acquisition. It's much
Oh
easier
yeah,
you're not having to sort of fight your head to find that position to actually see what's going on. You literally
oh,
bring your head up and it's almost like looking through a day scope. It's there.
yeah, it's
Now,
massive.
it is massive, and they've actually changed the screen inside as well, which has
Yeah.
made a huge difference.
Oh yeah, that resolution of that new display is ridiculous. I mean, it's 2,560 times 2,560 resolution. So that is compared with the old, I think it was 1024 768. That's that's a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And still, I think the ocular piece, it's big enough to give you that comfort and that perfect eye relief. But it's also not that large that it will interfere with your bolt action.
Yep.
And that is kind of, like the I think the tricky part, because I've seen some manufacturers day scopes making these massive field of views in their day optics. And I mean, they're great to look through. Don't get me wrong, the image is absolutely brilliant and crystal clear and everything. But if you have anything but a straight pull or a semi-automatic,
It's just not going to work, is it?
no, you'll squeeze your thumb. It's just
Yeah.
like, or have extremely high mounts, which kind of looks a bit dodgy. But
Well, it also takes the more you mount the higher you mount the scope. Obviously, you're changing a lot of characteristics. So it's better to keep that
yeah,
scope as close to the center point of the barrel as possible.
oh yeah, definitely for hunting. I mean, long range doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter, but it's um, you're not going to be rushing it the same way. You're
Exactly.
gonna have your bubble leveler. You're gonna have all your tools. You're gonna make sure you're all leveled, and you're eliminating a lot of the different factors. But for hunting and moving and so on, yeah, you want to keep it
Keep it nice
as
and
low as
quick
possible. Yeah,
and low as
yeah,
possible. So obviously we've now got this fantastic display. So if anybody gets a chance to look at one of these, yeah, it's so easy to get your eye onto and see what's going on. They still have made it so that you can put a rubber eye cup on it, sort of
yep.
the little bellows. So if you are somebody that shoots with one of those, obviously that's got a really nice mounting system now, and it locks into place, and you can adjust it and get yourself set up.
Mm. Yeah, the new eyepiece is definitely it's the thing that I like. If you can have whatever sensor, whatever lens you want in front of it, that new eyepiece I think is gonna be the new standard for how future things is gonna be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the things that really has sort of stepped it into the market in a totally different way. Because as you say
Yeah,
before, any thermal scope, you're there trying to get that eyepiece up to get a good clear view to see the whole image. And
yeah,
you're moving around to get on it and things like that. Now, some people will probably
yeah.
argue about that and say they don't, but I guarantee you, everybody will have to adjust their head slightly on a thermal scope or a night vision scope to get that all aligned and to be able
Oh
to
yeah,
see what's going on.
yeah. And I mean, with the old scopes, I never really thought of it too much of a problem. If I wanted to see all the widgets and so on and watch the time or whatnot, I'd just push my head a bit forward and you know have a look at. But when it was time to shoot, I didn't bother with that. I just want to see the crosshair and the target.
Exactly.
But
But again, as we said in the last podcast, the key about that is if you're shooting something, it's that field of view and being able to
yeah, you
see
lose
whether
it.
or not things move off. So
Yeah.
having that bigger eyepiece where you don't have to worry about that, suddenly you've got the whole picture there in front
Mm,
of you. And if you can keep your
mm,
head steady when you squeeze the trigger and see your target still, then
yeah.
happy days.
And you're actually addressing something that I think is really important with the field of view. That I think is really important because I mean, we've had discussions about um, going to a round image to mimic the analog feel and whatnot. Now the problem with that, as I see it at least, is that the sensor is always rectangular mostly.
Yep. Yes.
Mm?
Yeah.
And if you then create a round image, so you market the scope being a certain resolution. Yes, the sensor is a certain resolution. But then you put a round display, you're cutting off the corners of it. You're losing a lot of that actual resolution of the full field of view because you're cutting it away, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
So with
100%.
this, yeah. So with this design, yes, there's rounded edges of the image in the scope. But what Pulsar did is the reason they did that is because the display is so extremely large that it's a bit too big for the actual ocular.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. So you can have the field of view in height completely undistorted. You've got that straight edge and top
You
bottom. So
do.
you don't
Yep.
lose any resolution of the sensor height, but you don't lose any of the sensor width either because when they round off the edges, it's just to make it look pleasant when you look through the ocular, but you still have the field of view in width
Yep.
maximum. So there's a tiny, tiny, tiny part of the image from the sensor that is, rounded off, but you still have the field of view in width. So you still have that
You still
uh,
got all the
10,
informations there, haven't you?
10,
Really?
24 resolution in width.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
that makes such a huge difference, especially because it isn't sort of something that's chopping it down and you're losing information. You know,
no.
it's all there.
Yeah. So we still have that, so even though we're going to a f101 60 millimeter focal length lens, um, it's still giving you 11.7 degree field of view,
Yep.
whereas the old XP50 had 12.4, and the XL50 had 14 degrees.
Yeah.
But I've always considered like the minimum field of view I want for boar hunting, especially close range, is 10.7.
Okay.
Yeah, because like then I have field of view that is wide enough to be able to watch my surroundings and so on. And if and when I shoot, If the pig runs off, I still have a good observation of the terrain. I can see the background, I can see backstops and everything with ease. If I have too much of a base magnification or narrow field of view, I will lose that information, and it's easy that you miss something in the background and so on, and that is for me a no-go. And then the scopes that have more narrow field of views, they're great for long range because then you have the resolution, you still have field of view for a certain range. But if you get within 60 meters, that's where I want plus 10.7 degree field of view. This one's got 11.7, which is well enough. And that new lens is giving it that massive detection range of 2,800 meters, which is, again, 500-meter improvement from the XL50.
So that was the other thing. Let's right. So now we've looked at the eyepiece where we're looking into it. Now let's jump to the other end, the business end, that's actually bringing all that information in. You've just mentioned that they've now put a 60mm lens on there. Other manufacturers are doing the same thing, but Pulsar's is a true full 60mm lens. It's got no rangefinders built into it or anything.
I'd say like this. The XL50, XP50, and so on, they have f1.0 lens.
Yep.
So that's a fast aperture f1.0, which means you have a focal length. So the distance between the sensor and the objective is 50mm, but the diameter is also 50mm.
Yep.
If you say have a 1.2 50mm lens, then the lens diameter is actually 42mm, but the focal length is 50.
Okay.
Yeah. And the lower the f-stop you go, yes, the faster the aperture, but there's a drawback. And the drawback is you get a very shallow depth of field, meaning it becomes extremely focus fuzzy.
Yes.
So you have to work with it all the time. So the back in the days we were using f1.2 lens on the XP50 and so forth, and they were great. And the good thing with those lenses were that they were very forgiving when it came to setting the focus for different ranges.
Okay.
Right, but they didn't get that sharpness to it. Going down to f1.0, you got that super crispy, super image, right? But you got a bit more narrow depth of field, so you had to work a bit more with focus to get the perfect image. Now this one is a 60mm f1.1.
Yep.
So it's slightly smaller than 60mm in diameter, but the focal length is 60mm. And the benefit of the 60mm focal length is you get that longer detection range, meaning that each pixel will have a much more narrow field of view. And since the resolution of the sensor is massive, you still get, so even if the lens has, so the benefit is basically when you go up in magnification, if you would go down to f1.0 or a lesser, the depth of field would be extremely shallow, and for closer shots you would have to work with that like a maniac.
Yeah. Constantly trying to focus it to get a sharp image.
So the f1.1 makes more sense in the aspect that it will be less focus fuzzy. It's still going to have a kind of a narrow or shallow depth of field because of the pixel pitch, the size of the lens, and the detection range.
Yep.
So you're still getting that ultra crisp image. But if we would have gone down a bit more, it would have been a lot more work with it. And another thing that we see on the market is some manufacturers putting lasers in the objective lens and so on.
Yeah.
Which is, a cool concept. I'm not going to deny that. But you're cutting off a huge part of the lens. And then you have to go down in the f-stop to bring in more information to the sensor, but you cut off, a large part of it. So you're not pulling more information in. It's got to be kind of equal to the f1.0.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
just that in going to explain to people, obviously that when we're talking about lasers, that's talking about the laser rangefinder. You'll
yeah,
see some manufacturers are now tucking because it keeps the scope looking sleek at the end of the day.
yes,
They've built the laser rangefinder actually physically into, well, cut a piece of the lens out, almost like taken off a hemisphere of the lens and
yeah,
banged a laser rangefinder into it.
yeah. And it's,
Now, yeah,
look,
Pulsar haven't done that. What they've done
no,
is their laser rangefinder is sat on top of the unit,
yes,
and it is basically it sits there and it sits higher than the actual lens, so you're not going to get it. It's not going to get in the way of your moderator or anything like that. It has a
no,
very good clear view, and yeah, it just does exactly what it says. So it's not affecting the optics at
yeah.
all.
No, and I mean since it's on top of the 12 o'clock position, it's still centered, so it's not going to be at an offset,
Yep.
giving you some weird readings. I mean, these are calibrated in the factory to do what they said to do what they promised to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're very very solid at that. But cutting out that part of the lens to me is like, oh, we got this super duper 0.9 lens. Yes, but you cut off 25% of it. So
Yes.
how are you
Exactly.
like? How could that? Yeah, it's not gonna pull in the information. So that is for me, like it's a part of marketing. I get the idea, but keeping the full lens, there is a reason for it, to get the best possible information to the sensor. And then again, when we're talking about the pixel pitch, microns, and so on, um, there are limits to how much a 12 micron uncooled sensor can do.
Yes. Yeah.
If we're talking about NETDs and so on, and every unit that Pulsar, ever since Pulsar kind of like started the whole thing with NETDs on the market, actually putting it to the market, telling them that NETD is important, which it is. The lower, the better. But there's a couple of ways you can do it. So you got the sensor NETD.
Yep.
Let's just make it simple. The raw horsepowers of the engine,
Yep.
what it
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
do without a turbo. Then you can add, components and software and so on. Let's call that a turbo.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, if you sit in a car with 500 brake horsepowers and no turbo, and you touch that pedal,
Yeah.
it's going
Yeah.
to be immediate, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's no lag.
Uh,
But
no,
exactly.
it just goes.
Yeah.
But most turbos, there's a bit of a lag in it. Now the same thing will happen with NETDs. So if you have a sensor capable of sub 35 NETD, that image is going to be less than 35 millikelvin.
Yes.
But if you add filtering to it, you can improve it by reducing the noise, improving the contrast, which means that they have a computer working with the information coming in to highlight it. So there's a bit of a process there. And that is going to cause a bit of lag and latency, but you're also reducing the noise. And in that noise, there's a lot of information that you're reducing that actually takes away a bit of the crispiness of the image. So you can see that grass and so on. It's not really defined. It's kind of a lump.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas in some scopes you can see like, yeah, that is definitely a straw grass at a certain range, which will be, kind of define on what kind of pixel pitch you have and what focal length you have.
Well, it's the software determination. It'll give you a love if you're looking, say, at a wild boar, for example. It'll give you a lovely image of a wild boar, but
Yeah.
it will reduce or remove or have to do something with the information around that. So
Yep.
therefore, the background becomes a little bit more not really there, a bit
Blurred,
fuzzy.
hazy. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So you get this absolutely sharp, really bang on. You can see the hairs on the animal. However, the information around it disappears. Whereas obviously,
Yeah.
when they're being driven
And,
straight,
and and to be fair, if you look closely, at these pictures. Well, oh, I see the hairs. You're not seeing the individual hairs at all. You're seeing lumps of hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
if you look at the pulsar, you don't see the lumps in the same way. It's more defined. You actually do see the differences in the whole fur.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's smoother because it's not filtered and highlighted in the same way. And they're
But
working much closer to the actual NSD of the sensor. And Pulsar has actually now started to define this in the specification.
yes.
So if
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
in and look at the website, you look at the Thermion XL, you'll see sensor NETD. Yes, the raw horsepower of the sensor. And then you can see system NETD, and that is NETD after algorithms.
Yeah. 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 That's
So
why you have
the
different modes basically to allow you to switch up. And if you
yeah,
if you want more filtering and more yeah, more sort of extra turbo boost on there, but your image
yeah,
will change basically as you go through.
yeah. It's exactly. So it's how should we put it? Like if you go on normal, high, and ultra mode in the amplification, those
Yes.
are amplification modes. They're not really making it more sensitive. They are interpreting the information in different ways just to be able to give you somewhat of a better image under certain conditions. So if you go to normal mode, that is going to be perfect for most nights. I'd say probably more than 90% of the evenings you're going out, normal mode is going to be the best because um, it's kind of like if you're into photography. If you're gonna set the aperture. So if it's broad daylight, you're gonna put the aperture small,
Yeah.
just because you want to reduce the amount of light that comes in, not to overexpose the film.
Yeah.
Same thing with thermal. You've got thermal high contrast, say early evening after a very bright and sunny day, and then you
Everything's
go out,
glowing. Yeah.
yeah, and then you go out in fog, which I think is kind of like the thermal misery. There's something in the way of the so like when we look at infrared heat, we're looking at radiation more than anything else. It's part of the electromagnetic spectrum,
Yep.
but it's sending particles or radiations that we cannot see. It's far beyond the visual spectrum, and you need another type of sensor to pick up that information. So the terrain and the animals basically become the flashlight shining at your eyes, and when we're getting into that, so you want to put the amplification level on the right setting for that particular environment you're in.
Yep.
So if you go
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
and it's really, really foggy, there is some sort of obstacle, small water driplets in the way of that radiation from coming to the sensor. And you want to amplify the little radiation that is coming to the sensor. That is why you go to ultra mode. You're overexposing the thermal low contrast environment
Yep.
to get
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
produce a better image where you get a bit more contrast. It's not going to be as detailed as on normal mode during a uh, thermal high contrast, and when you have fog, it's a thermal low contrast. So you want
Yeah.
to overexpose it. But then you also have the situation where you have a morning after a very rainy and cold night, but there's no fog. The air is kind of dry. There's no obstacle, but you still have a thermal low contrast terrain. That's
Yeah.
where you go to high. Because when the animals come, they are going to be kind of exposed like in the normal mode, but you want to be able to see that terrain to see if you have backstop or anything. So you want to overexpose it a little bit to get that
Yeah. Yeah.
information. So and so it's not really improving the NHDs. We're just making sure that the right amount of thermal information is being detected by the sensor. So we're not overexposing it or underexposing it. But when you do that, when you see the tests, where you see some people comparing, why is always the pulsar put on ultra mode with smoothing filter? That is like the worst possible setting you can have for 99% of the cases when you're out.
Yep.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
only something I would ever use in really, really heavy fog And when you go to ultra mode, since you're overexposed, it gets a bit more noisy. You might want to turn the smoothing filter off to reduce the noise a bit.
So it gives you a nice steady picture that doesn't have a lot of great. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's you see these trickeries going on out there, which I think is quite amusing, to be honest.
It's just one of those things. It'll probably raise questions, but as I say, the unit itself is. It seems to be with that. It's now got a a 10 by 24 by 768 12.
There's still the XL sensor.
XL sensor in
768. Yeah. 12 micron. Sensor NETD is sub 35. System NETD is sub 20.
Yep.
With the algorithm, so the NED is quite close to the actual capability of the sensor.
Yeah.
But when you see some of these numbers going beyond that with 12 micron, it's just, there's going to be a bit of issues.
But I think one of the main reasons is that Pulsar, there's a lot of information happening already and being processed by the microprocessor on there. And the big problems you'll get is if you try and run more software, the processor has to run faster, therefore needs to dissipate heat. So you have to then suddenly have some way of removing that heat from. It's like anybody listening on a phone or a laptop or anything like that. If you work it hard, it gets hot. And the last thing you want is your thermal scope trying to dissipate that heat at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, I think they've managed to do pretty well though with the.
The Outdoor Gibbon podcast is proudly sponsored by the Shooting and Hunting Academy. Through the Academy, shooters, hunters, and those involved in the use of firearms can gain an in-depth and unique level of training that enables them to shoot better, behave more effectively in the field, up their strike rates, as well as learning new skills. Crucially, those new to deer stalking, the Academy also offers the Proficient Deer Stalker Certificate Level 1, the PDS-1, a deer management certificate that is nationally recognised and accredited both by Lantra and UK Rural Skills. Visit the Shooting and Hunting Academy to find out more. Let's get back to the show.
Oh, magnesium alloy housings and so on.
Yeah.
I think the worst part, like the thing that I worry about most as a shooter, is the latency.
Yeah, of course. We spoke about that in the previous.
Yeah, I've seen terrible latency out there, which is just one point of is it actually usable? For me, that's the first thing I check for, like military standard, and still today, and this is good enough for some of the best, most prioritized people in the world, like Gibbons free shit, so they can have good gear. Is still sub 50 NETD.
Yeah.
And the reason is, it's when you're manufacturing sensors, only a small portion of the sensor being manufactured will be able to hold a certain NETD. It's not something you can mass produce.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're artificially inflating the numbers, yes, then.
Well, if you're going to use software will cover all of that up. But if you're actually trying to do it where it's actually on the silicon, on the actual piece of silicon, and again, these aren't the sensors. Again, are only picked. They're basically tested and picked to make handpicked to make sure they work.
Yeah. So the Linred guarantees that these sensors, not the system entity, these sensors will be below that NETD that are specified. And I mean, sure, you can be very, very fortunate and get something that maybe is sub 27 on a 12 micron. You can be very, very fortunate to get that. But the amount of sensors that are capable of that is such a minute percentage. It's not feasible to have that in production.
So the nice, and obviously the sort of the last major key point of this scope is they have reduced the base magnification. So it is it starts off at a lower mag, doesn't it? I think it starts at 2.5.
Yeah, so the XL50 had 1.75. This one is a 2.5. Yeah, so this has actually got more magnification,
right,
and less field of view, but it's got massively increased detection range.
Yeah, I think it's 2,800 meters or something like that.
and the old one was 2,300.
Yeah.
So there's a huge difference there. So when you're looking at a distance, like when I was out at the range when we were doing the film that you might have seen on YouTube, we were playing around with on the range, and I was trying to figure out like how much of a difference is. I brought the pen and paper out, did the math, and just to make it simple, if you look at a target at uh, 2,800 meters with the XL60.
Yep.
And then you put the exact same target at 230 meters with the XL50. It's going to be the same resolution of the target because you have the equal amount of pixels on target.
Yep. Yeah.
So you're adding another 50 meters to the exact same resolution. And what I felt doing that is like if I took say the XP50, always loved the XP50, and looked at the wild boar and was trying to gender ID it because of our ethics and so on. I'll be able to do that to 100% up to around 180 meters.
Yeah. Okay.
With the XP50, but this thing, we're talking, we're adding another 150 meters for gender ID.
Yeah. It's as I say, if anybody hasn't had a chance to go and have a look through one, or you're at one of the shows that they'll be there, go along and seriously get a look through them. It's it certainly does. It changes things completely, really.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely love it. And then you have two siblings to it coming out, or that are out already. The XP60 and the XG60.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and the XG60, that is, you still have, since it's a 12 micron with the same lens, yes, the sensor has a lot less resolution.
Yeah.
Since it's a 644-80, which used to be the flagship resolution.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's still great. But, going from a 2.5 base mag to a 4 base mag. So if you wanted to be shooting, for longer ranges every day, I'm thinking this one will be very popular in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, in Foxing, you're going to be shooting well past 100 meters.
Well, it's 100 out to sort of, probably most guys would say they're probably shooting out to maybe, I don't know, 300.
Yeah, and then the scope is going to be, you don't need more than the XG60 to be honest, hand on heart.
No, exactly.
Because you got the magnification, you got the exact same picture image quality at further ranges as the XL60.
Yeah.
The only bonus with the XL60, you got that wider field of view, so it's much more all round. But if you know that you're going to be shooting long range over time, go with the XG60.
Yeah.
You're going to be very happy with it. If you know that you're going to be shooting everything from, especially for wild boar, from 50 meters to 200 meters, then the XP60 is probably going to be, one of your favorites. And the main reason to choose the XP60 is because of the 17 micron 640 XP sensor. That is sub 25 NED sensor. System NED on that thing is sub 18.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just incredible.
Yep. No, and I think that's the thing. I think people, they look at what the flagship is and things like that, and it's actually explaining to them that these other sensors will do exactly you've got to find what you need specifically and then choose the sensor that works for you, rather than just going, I've got to have the XL, and then they go, oh, but look at the price of that, and it's like, well, do you actually need that? Whereas the XG would do exactly what you require.
Yeah. I mean, they're just tools for different jobs. It's just like choosing between a driven hunt scope and a stalking scope or a long range scope. They're just different for different end users. If you got professional hunter doing everything from close range to long range, yes, there is no question XL60.
Yeah.
You want that. But then you have the one who only stalks and so on, and doing focusing and never shoots closer than 100 meters. XG.
Yep. Yep.
But then you got the one who might go from 50 to a bit more XP. And again, then there's a choice like, all right, I really do want to prioritize the best NETD, because where I am at, it's always foggy, it's always rainy, it's always shit. And
How do you know Scotland's like that? No, it's not.
Oh
that
yeah,
bad.
yeah. No, I don't know. It sounds. To be honest, everyone says Scotland looks a lot like Sweden. To be honest, but we got shitty weather as well. So you're not alone. But no, then when you have the lesser pleasant weather, it's also easier to get in closer to the animals.
Oh, absolutely. You use the weather and the advantage to you at the end of the day, don't you?
And then the XP60 is a no-brainer.
Yeah, 100%. But again, I think that it's an absolute game changer to the market.
Mm-hmm.
So people are hopefully going to get the opportunity to see it. We thought we should talk about it and just cover those bases, that if you are looking for thermals, there's a lot of other stuff out there on the market now, but it really is just be careful of software and NETDs, and basically make sure that
NETDs is a specification that's been defouled by marketing.
Yes.
And when Pulsar were started the whole thing on the civilian market, was because they were able to acquire the sub 40 NETD 640 by 480 XP sensors from Linred in France, that they could specify and they could guarantee these sensors are this sensitive. Basically overnight, everything that was 12 micron even at that point in time went to 40 milkib with software. But the latency in the units was like, some of them, I'm not going to say all, because some were all right, but most of them were absolutely terrible. Image-wise, it looked great. It did the job, but latency was massive. And in some cases, it was up towards half a second.
And I think that's the biggest problem. And we covered this in the first part. We talked all about the tech behind it and stuff like that. But again, it's really strongly advisable that what you're looking at is that time from the image coming into the screen to what you're seeing is enough for an animal to take one or two steps. And sometimes it's, especially if you've got a fair range on that as well, it's a hit or a miss.
And or worst case, definitely wounding.
Yeah,
in a terrible way. And I don't think any hunter, really, not anyone who's self-respecting as a hunter, would ever be fine with wounding something.
No, 100%. Everybody wants a clean kill.
Yeah, it's not why we do it.
No.
But it's I think it's, so that part is extremely important, and in a scope such as this one that is kind of built, purpose built to be able to do long range.
So it'll be interesting, because obviously
not real long range, but longer than average.
Yes, you're not going to take one of these and try and shoot silly distances, but you are going to shoot further
on steel targets. I might have already done that on steel targets.
Fair enough. So there is a film, I think you mentioned that Pulsar have produced. So if you do get a chance, go and have a look at that. It explains more about the scope and some of the other bits of equipment as well. What else have we got? Let's just have a quick catch up on some new releases that have come out. So they have produced everybody loves the Axion, and there are a couple of new Axions. I think you've got they've got a 35mm lens on them now, haven't they?
There's one of them, yeah. You got two 30mm and one 35.
Yep. Yeah. And then if you have or have used the binos, there is the XT range.
Yes, the newest sensor in the range.
Yep. And that again is it's it's a fairly phenomenal piece of kit to look through those.
Yeah, that's got like we should start with the Axion. We'll get to the merger, but the Axions, you basically have three models.
Yep.
You got the XQ30 Pro, and here's yeah, I'll try to explain the Pro business for people because this one is confusing. So there's a lot of units on the Pulsar product line that's called XQ35, for
Yep.
example. And then there are some that are called XQ35 Pro.
Right.
Yes, in current production. It used to be the Pro was added because the unit was upgraded from an XQ sensor that had a lesser NED and had a different lens. And
Okay.
then they were able to get hold of even better XQ sensors with better NED, sub 25 NED XQ sensor instead of sub 40. So how were we going to be? How was Pulsar going to define which is what in the transition?
Okay.
So there was a new generation, an upgraded version of the Thermion with a new lens. So it went from the XQ38 sub 40 millikelvin
Right.
to this XQ35 with sub 25 millikelvin.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah, and people were like, "Oh, what? Why did they go from a bigger objective lens to a smaller objective lens?" No, it's actually quite the opposite. It was a f1.2 38 millimeter lens
Okay.
on the XQ38, meaning that the lens was only 32 millimeters.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So they went to f1.0 35, meaning you had 35 millimeter diameter, but also a 35 millimeter focal length. So they actually went up in size on the lens with a couple of millimeters, got a better, a faster aperture, more information to the sensor, but they also got the better sensors. So it just was an improvement, and that was why they call it the Pro.
Okay.
So
Right.
when
So
you
that
have
should
something
hopefully,
called
yeah.
yeah, so when you have something called the Pro, is usually because there's been a predecessor that was not capable of
Right.
this.
Okay.
So the XQ30 Pro was the first Axion housing with an XQ sensor, and I'm not talking about X Axion 2s because that was a completely different mold and CNC
Yeah.
operation to
Yeah.
make it was
Yeah.
larger, bulkier, and everything. So the Axion XQ30 Pro is kind of like what the Axion 2 should have been when it was released because it's much smaller, much more agile.
And
Uh,
it's got a new screen in it as well, like a bit of a sepia view when you look
yes,
through it. It's not that
yes, it's
bright,
got
sharp white.
yeah, so it's got an AMOLED display.
That's
So
right.
the old one used to be HD AMOLED. So the HD, um, this one is an AMOLED display,
Yeah.
which is a great display. They went down a bit in resolution on it because since the sensor has lower resolution, there's not really any point to have a huge resolution on the display because it doesn't really do that much. You just add more noise to the image in some cases.
Yeah.
But the biggest benefit is you can reduce um, drainage of the battery and induce and get longer battery life.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I've got one on
Yeah,
test at the moment, and yeah,
yeah, love
it
it.
has, it's just it's fantastic. It's one of those little
Yeah,
pocket devices that you can just chuck
yeah,
in your pocket, and it's there.
yeah,
You're
and
good. You've got a thermal on you.
and we sell heaps of them to professional hunters who. So we have um, I would say governmental hunters who. So if you have a car accident and you hit an animal of a certain size, if
Yep.
you hit something like as big as a roe deer, if you would leave the place, it would be considered legally a hit and run.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to call the police, and they will send out a professional hunter to track down the animal and kill it. Now, uh, this style of hunting, I mean, they have their dogs. These dogs are qualified, certified to search, and I mean, the dogs are probably the best sensors you can ever get. They
Yep.
will find whatever you're looking for, you know. But they also like to have thermals, but they don't want big, heavy, clunky things weighing them down. They're already walking, kilometers and kilometers every night, doing this. So they want lightweight, simple, really, really good head torches and so on to be able to see. But they want something lightweight to be able to just spot. Because usually when they come to the site of the accident, they'll get out of the car, pull the thermal out, just look, oh, that's over there in the ditch, done. I don't need to bring the dogs out and all the sign that it's already, it just saves us so much time in that case. So they're looking for small and convenient, but they also want, to be able to change batteries because they're driving around, a lot. So the Axion with the APS-3 battery is really, really smart. It's an armored battery, so ion lithium batteries can kind of like be dangerous if you would poke them with a knife or anything and start bursting into flame in your pocket. That has happened, and there's a reason why Pulsar use the proprietary batteries, because they can ensure that the quality of the batteries are correct, and it's not harmful for the components and sensors and so on. Secondly, there's less risk of catastrophic failure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that is, there's a reason for them. And then you have the XG30. So the XQ30 Pro has a detection range of 850 meters and a field of view, I think it's 13.7 degrees. Right. And a sub 25 NETD. So it's really, really good in bad weather and so on. But, it's got a bit shorter detection range, but it still has a massive field of view.
Yep.
In a very tiny package. Then you got the XG30. So we bump up from a 384 288 17 micron to a 640 480 12 micron pixel pitch.
Yep.
And resolution. And you add that 30 millimeter lens, and that means you got 1300 meters of detection range, but you have 14-degree field of view.
Yep.
So you just add to the identification range and all that. And it's a sub 40 NED, but this is a sub 40 sensor, not system. So it's still extremely good. I've been comparing sub 40 NED sensors with systems of sub 25, and the sub 40 is still blowing them out of the water.
Right.
Because it's actually capable, because the other ones is still sub 50 sensor sitting in there that's artificially brought down to something else. Sensor is still sub 50.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not going to be able to detect that, So it's kind of like, it's a. And then you go to the biggest one. So you got the XG30 compact with its field of view and detection range, and then you got the XG35.
Yep.
And that's when we get into the bigger lens, 1750 meters detection range, and a field of view of 12.5.
Right. Yeah.
So this one fits in your pocket. It's a little bit larger in the lens. It's not as easy to put in your pocket, but if you need that extended detection range, it's there.
It certainly gives you that extended detection range. We did a test with it, just out of curiosity, really, out on the hill the other day. Cold, crisp day, and you see things a long way away, and it's great. It just it just brings things up, and it's good to see.
Yeah, and if you want to compare it, like most people who've been using thermals has probably used an XP50 at some point.
Yeah.
And just know how ridiculously good the XP50 is. What we have to remember is an XP50 is a 640 by 480 17 micron with a 50 millimeter f1.0 lens, sub 25 mil Kelvin. If we go XG35, the relation between sensor and objective lens is very, very similar. It's almost identical on both of them.
Yep.
The only difference is the XG sensor is 2/3 roughly the size of an XP sensor. So the objective lens can be 2/3 the size of the XP sensor, and you get the same field of view and same detection range.
Yep. Yeah.
So, but the difference is XP has got a bigger sensor physically. It's got a bigger lens physically. It gets almost like that exact same field of view and detection range, but there's much more information coming into that sensor.
Yes. Yeah.
So that is why the XP50 is always going to outperform the XG35. So I think a really good name for the XG35 to explain what it is would have been to call it the XP50 Lite.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. It does the
Yeah.
same job, and you get it to a much lesser cost because it's cheaper to manufacture with 35mm lens and the XG sensor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's just dive on to the last part, which is the
Mm.
merger XTs.
Hmm.
As I say, everybody's probably seen mergers before, which is like the binoculars of the thermal world, and the
Yeah,
XT sensor is their sort of their latest.
the new flagship.
Yeah, yeah, the real sort of I can see everything kind of thing.
Yeah, I absolutely love that thing. I can't. It's. I think you were there when we saw it the first time, right? The first
Yeah, yeah.
prototype, functional one.
We had
And
the three choices of color.
yeah, oh
And
yeah, yeah.
we
It
talk
was
about the casings here, which is
yeah,
there was a couple of choices in color what they were going to make them,
yeah,
and
yeah. And I thought it was so funny because um, people were looking at that thing, a completely different thing, completely differently from what I was doing. I saw
yes, yeah,
people just going like, "Wow, whoa, this is so cool, and this is such a huge benefit and everything." And I was trying to figure out, is there any improvement over the XL50?
yes, yeah.
So yeah, were you standing with me while I was doing this test? I can't
Possibly
remember. I
because
think you were.
I remember
Yeah,
looking through those in the XL50 and trying to work out what the difference was, but it
yeah,
was I think it was explained, but yeah, they certainly
yeah,
yeah there is a difference in what they do.
yeah. So the main difference is really that the XL, again, we go to 50mm 1.0 lens, right? So the 50mm lens will define the detection range of a 12 micron pixel pitch, regardless resolution of the sensor.
Yeah.
Period. Just is. The XL sensor is over 66% larger in surface area than the XL sensor, meaning that at distance, there's no difference. None whatsoever. It is the exact same resolution of that target at distance. 50mm, 12 micron. But the field of view was enormous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the XL50 had 14-degree field of view, whereas with this one you go to 17.5.
Yeah, you're seeing so much. You get so much more
Yeah.
information to see. So it's almost like
Yeah, and
having
then
a bigger set of binoculars at the end of the day, isn't it? Really?
yeah, and then they added that AMOLED 1280 by 960 displays, which were again an improvement from the old ones that had, I think it was 1280. No, wait, hold on a minute. Um, yeah, they chose a larger display to be able to enhance the capability of that wide field of view.
Yeah.
And they also added the image stabilization to this unit, which I thought like first when I heard about it, I thought this is kind of a gimmick, you know, image stabilization. When will I ever need that? But I've found out very soon that especially when I zoom in on a target, I really like that image stabilization.
Yeah. No, definitely it makes a big difference. I don't have a set of mergers. For me, I don't think personally, I don't see the need for a thermal binocular. A monocular works perfectly for what I do. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that other people like having the thermal binoculars. But the stuff I need them for, it's a quick. It's either you're trying to find something or reference it,
Yeah,
and after that, if it's daytime, then you'll move over to your normal binos, or the rifle scope comes
yeah,
up.
yeah. No, like I depending on what I'm doing, since I'm very, very spoiled, I mean, we are very fortunate. We're not put in a
Yeah,
normal position. Um, in all honesty, no, I think like the binos, I love them as if know that I'm going to be more stationary, not moving about too much. Absolutely love the mergers. Absolutely love
yes,
them. Just less eye fatigue, more comfortable to sit and scan for a long time. But if I'm going to be moving around, I'm going to be trying to choose the most agile unit,
yeah.
and in many cases it will be an Axion.
Yeah, yeah. I don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, the Telos is great and it really
Love it.
does have
Yeah.
its place. But again, it's one of those things that you spend all day, it just sits in your hand. You don't want to put it in a pocket. It is just there. If you're out and about,
Yeah.
that's it. And eventually I end up kind of hanging mine now on the end of the sticks and then the rifle's up and
Yeah.
away you work. And it
Yeah.
just that seems to be where it goes and that's how it works.
Yeah. I use I got a neck sling for my Telos. So I just put it around my neck and I look through it with my left eye. So I'm a right-handed, but I use my monocular with my left.
Yeah,
Walk
same
around with
here.
it, scan it. And the only reason why I would choose the Telos over the Action is when I want that extended range
Yep. Yeah.
and field of view in one unit. So I'll be using the XP50 or the XL50. But again, then the terrain kind of demands more power,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
longer ranges, rather longer range to ID.
Yeah.
And then you need those bigger units.
You do. Anyway,
It's a compromise, yeah.
I think we'll draw this to a close. So hopefully,
Mm.
if there are any questions, fire them over either to
Yeah.
us or you can go on the Pulsar website, or you can dive on, if you're in the UK, dive onto Thomas Jacks and have a look at them. If not,
Hmm.
head to Pulsar and see what's going on there. If you're anywhere in the rest of the world, go to your local Pulsar site and have a look on that, and they will explain more for you. But
Mm.
thank you very much for coming on and doing part two. And I
No
think
worries.
we've really have had a good touch on some of the new kit out there. So yeah, go and have a look at it.
Absolutely. Let's yeah. I think anyone who sees it is going to be more than impressed.
Totally. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you very much again, and we'll
Yeah.
catch you again soon.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Yet again, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that podcast. We did talk in depth about that new scope, that XL60. I have one on test at the moment, and I can tell you it is certainly something that's it changes the game. That eye relief on it is absolutely fantastic. If you do get a chance to have a look at one, do. The shows will all have them. Even one of your local stockies may have one in stock. Go in, have a look. You will be completely blown away by the way it works. If you've got any questions or anything like that, ping them over to me. Find one of the other pro staff members in your country or somebody that you know online and ask them questions about it. They'll all be happy enough to tell you what's going on. Anyway, we'll catch you on the next one.